our first event of the year and the first event in our Careers and Connections series. So shortly we will be starting with the panel discussion, but first I would just like to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for showing up this evening, and thank you. And for what started a year ago with just 60 attendees in the other room next door, we have now had, and it has grown over this last year, and tonight we've had just under 130 people attend and, well, register for the event. So thank you so much for your support. These events were designed to support and inspire the next generation. And I am so thankful to our amazing speakers who kindly give up their time and share their insights and knowledge. And also my amazing team of brand ambassadors, who we have Sia and Sahir this evening. Stand up please, ladies. They are representing us tonight. Please do connect with them, especially if you are here attending on your own. Their role is to support you and to help you to connect with the industry. And alongside myself and also my colleague Sarah, who checked you in on the door earlier this evening. And lastly, I would also like to thank our amazing sponsors and partners. As a not-for-profit organisation, we heavily rely on their support to be able to put events on like these. So please join me in thanking our gold sponsor this evening, which is Elizabeth Norman International. Our bronze sponsors this evening, which is TestSet, Catalyse Research, Smart Connect Research, iView London, XYZ Field, and Prevision Research. They are our sponsors this evening, so please do thank them. And I would also like to thank our event partners, which is Aura Insight, and I see a couple of members here this evening, EMEA and Significant Insight. Now, if you're not familiar with the Significant Insight, they have a fantastic platform which also supports and recognises young rising talent in our industry. They have a fantastic platform full of content, a website and resources aimed at inspiring and supporting the next generation of leaders. If you would like some more information about Significant Insight, please do come and see myself or the man himself, James Endersbury, who set it all up. Yay! Now, each year they run the Global 30s Under 30s campaign, which celebrates and recognises the young talent in this industry. And the campaign starts in May, so do keep your eyes open, keep your eyes out on social media, and do nominate and support. So I'm now going to hand you over to Liz. That's enough from me. Liz will be chairing this afternoon or this evening's session, so over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Tara. And I just want to say a big shout out for you too, because from a small idea that actually came, I'm going to say it came at a Wire exec conference, because I think we should shout out to Wire. But, you know, there was just a small idea. To have this number of people, you've done brilliantly well, so well done. So, let me introduce you to the people that are going to be talking. Should we? Standing on it. Craig, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Liz. God, this booms if you get it too close. I'm going to have to perfect my microphone placement. Yeah, I'm Greg. I know a few of you in the room already. It's lovely to see some old faces. I am currently the head of brand growth at Ipsos. That is, in essence, like representing the commercial service lines in a commercial role for Ipsos. So taking the brilliant work that we do, tying it together and representing a really strong brand offer for our clients. I've been doing it since November. It's a brand new role. I don't quite know what I'm doing yet. I'm finding my own way with it, which keeps me on my toes. But it's been really fun.
And is that the employee brand as well as the brand to clients?
No, it is focusing on the client brand. But tonight, I guess I'm representing the employee brand a little bit, Liz. Yes, to your point.
Sarah.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Jenkins. I am the founder and director at Magenta, a very small research agency, but mighty. So we definitely punch above our weight and love a bit of DE&I. So I'm kind of here in that capacity to share some of the work we've done internally and externally.
I'm Nathan. My voice is really deep, so just bear with me. Can you hear me back? Yeah. Excellent. Because I've been told it's so deep, it's like Darth Vader. So I'm Nathan. Nathan Omare. I am the Insight Director for EMEA for SharkNinja. So most people don't know who SharkNinja is, but most people have their bloody products. So they do things like air fryers, Ninja air fryer. If you're young, you know what the Ninja Cream is. If you're old, young people nodding. And that's my role. My role is to work out how to sell this stuff to you guys in a more creative way. And I've been at SharkNinja for about a year. Before that, I was at Sky. So my background is very much Sky, media companies. I work for quite a lot of media companies. And one of my favorites to refer to, which is actually selling really expensive luxury mobile phones to the nouveau rich. So if you know what Vertu is, it's like if you've got a Ferrari or Lamborghini, you will have a Vertu. They're £10,000 each. So yeah, that's what's my favorite job.
So I just wanted to start with each of your own sort of understanding of DEI, your own experience of it, and having read your little backgrounds. Nathan, you're the one that seems to have experienced probably the most prejudice. So I just wondered if you wanted to just talk us, I mean obviously you're not going to want to go into it all, but just a little bit about your experience of DEI, of culture, of inclusion.
I'm trying to keep it succinct. I've had some really great experiences and some really bad ones. I mean, I spoke to somebody the other day and I said, and somebody said to me, how many times have you been stopped by the police? I said, about 30. And it's like, really? And so that's the environment I kind of grew up in as a young person. So I'm looking out, I'm older, I look like I can afford the car I drive, so they leave me alone. But in terms of work, I spent most of my time in, beginning of my career working for media companies like, most people know what FlexTech is, but FlexTech is essentially Virgin Media now. They used to have television programs that themselves, so in those days. So they had something like Trouble, which I worked on, Discovery channels, and I worked on 5 of those. So my experience is very much what you expect from media companies from back in those days. I think you must have heard of some of those horrendous stories from the BBC, what they have to talk about because they're a public company. But it's in this environment, I'm so used to walking into companies where there's 500, sometimes 1,000 people, and I kind of know every single person who looks like me by name, by who their partner is. That's how few there were in media. So it's always been a difficult thing to actually work in. But I think I was saying to you, Liz, earlier. Liz, I've known for a lot. I didn't know it was you today. It's so funny. Liz, I've known for years because I think you secured my second job. So I think it's always, I would say, I don't want to go into detail because I'll start crying. I'm very sensitive. But it's one of those things which I was saying earlier that you have to get a thick skin for my generation. And one thing that I'm really pleased about people who are younger, they don't have to tolerate some of the stuff I actually went through. And that's just sometimes just down to the fact that people aren't familiar with who you actually are, and they have stereotypes in their heads and stuff like that. So I've had to fight that all the way through my career. I've had to overcome obstacles. I've had to be sometimes twice as good as everybody else to actually make sure, I always came in like an hour and a half before my boss came in. on purpose to actually show I was dedicated to what I actually did. Everybody else did it. And I'm lucky. I was saying to Liz earlier that I've got Nigerian parents, and if you've got Nigerian parents of my generation, they're quite harsh. So there's no simple way. It's like get back on the horse until you can ride the horse. And I think that's what I've had to do a lot through my career is people getting promoted before you. So people who have had, my favorite one was going for a job interview, and somebody who worked for me, who's had somebody who worked for him got the job over me. And I thought that was really quite funny. And I had to laugh at it because if you don't, then it will depress you and you give up. And for me, that's kind of an example of what I had to go through all my career. And it's, I'm quite happy where I actually am now, but I see it as something which has actually helped me build my resilience. And like the company I work for now, I find it really easy. Everybody else, a lot of people come in that company, struggle because it's super fast, it pivots a lot, and it doesn't suit a lot of people who have that background and tough backgrounds to actually deal with it. So I hope that kind of gives you a little taste. I just don't want to go too much into detail. I will start crying.
Well, next. Sarah, you're next. Because actually, interestingly, when I read your next, you didn't put anything about experiencing any prejudice as a woman, which, so I'll leave it to you.
Okay, right. Since being asked the very question, it has occurred to me. So I think my journey with inclusion really started, I guess, I did a year in employment between my second and third year at university, and I was working in the market research department of National Savings, now NS&I. And it was the first time I was exposed to the term glass ceiling. I didn't know what that was until I started working there. I was literally horrified. I was like, what? I mean, I had literally been led to believe I could achieve anything. And then all of a sudden people were telling me because I was a woman I couldn't. And I couldn't quite get my head around it, right? So that was my dissertation for my undergraduate, which turned into funded. My PhD was then in gender in the workplace and mothers and families, so I did a PhD in it. During that, I worked at the Women and Equality Unit in Cabinet Office for periods of my time during my PhD, so I got exposed quite early on. I then started work for a think tank, Centre for Economic and Social Inclusion. So I think inclusion and fairness just became intrinsically in me. When you say that, and you've just triggered a memory, it was a small company, and unfortunately for them, they had everything saved on the server. And one day I was on the server and I found the salaries. And I was being paid significantly less than the male counterpart who was at a level below me. That is when I went, I'm out of here, handed in my notice. They offered me a pay rise and a promotion, and I said, not a chance. Too little, too late. And I think it's just put a fire in my belly ever since, and it's become a point for me ever since that fairness, transparency, and equality is a given. That's it, basically.
Greg, you have a very interesting sort of family story to tell. And in some ways I'm quite interested whether you can tell it, but having probably not experienced prejudice yourself, have your children, and yes.
Yeah, thanks Liz. As a white, middle-class, middle-aged man, I do feel somewhat of an imposter on tonight's platform, it would be fair to say. No, Liz's point is an interesting one. I grew up in rural Lincolnshire in England. Those of you that don't know it, it is probably the most vanilla, beige county in the country. I didn't choose where I was born. I still go back. I still support the football team from Lincoln, but it is one of the whitest areas in the country. It certainly was in the 80s when I was growing up there. I joked in the notes that I sent to Liz, but the closest I got to diversity was 7 miles away in a local Chinese restaurant. Literally, that was it. It was a very, very homogenous area. And when I was 18, or as I grew up, I was really interested in cultures around the world. I went to study languages at university. I've then lived all over the world doing various things. As it happens, I then married a Filipino lady who is born and raised in London, so she's second generation, and in many ways is actually more English than I am. She's lived in the UK for more years than I have. Culturally, she's certainly very, very anglicised and doesn't sort of hark back on her Filipino heritage all that much. But it does mean that our three daughters are mixed race, and yeah, it's a really interesting question as to whether they've experienced any kind of discrimination, and the reality is not really yet, and that's something that I'm really, really happy about. They are conscious of looking a bit different to the white kids that are at school with them. But I think the world has generally moved on. We now live in Surrey, and while Surrey is probably also not renowned for being the most culturally diverse of counties in London, we are on the London borders of Surrey, so come on, we'll give us some street cred from that point of view. But no, they go to school in a much more mixed area, right? So they're not standing out as the only mixed race girls that are at that school. But they are conscious of it, and they do talk about it, and they are really aware of their race. But as of yet, it's not something that has negatively impacted them. If anything, they wear their Filipino sort of badge as a badge of honour, which is something I'm really proud of. And I think the world has definitely moved on since the 80s when a mixed race Filipino English kid hanging around Lincolnshire would certainly have raised a few eyebrows. So from that point of view, I think there's progress for sure.
So I kind of agree with you, Greg. It has moved on, and so you don't get the name calling anymore. You don't get that in work. I have that in work, right? People calling me certain words in work. I also, this is the old days of media, right? Of the days of Rupert Murdoch and Sly. So if you're old enough to remember what it was like in media then, it was also horrendous, right? And so you don't get that anymore. What you get is the implicit biases will happen a lot. So you get excluded from meetings. They won't invite you for meetings which you should have been in, right? That's quite common for me. And what I've had to do over the years is just kind of put yourself forward, because there's a thing about giving power to people, right? So if you want to be treated equally, that basically means that somebody has to give away some power, right? And to do that, you need to take some of that power away. And you take that power away by actually making sure that you get yourself proactively into those meetings, you demonstrate your value, and it breaks that stereotype. So again, I'm not sorry as well. Sorry for it. And my kids go through the same thing, right? And it's still there. It's just not so explicit anymore. And I think the challenge, for me, is you've got to stand up and fight, right? Because I'm not a fan of bullies. I went to school full of bullies, and bullies are cowards, and they will pick the victim who they see as easy meat, right? They're like predators. And for me, if you stand up, they'll find somebody else. And I think one of the things I had to do in my career very early on was stand up for myself. And those bullies moved on to someone else. But you also have, one of the things I had to do is actually then prove myself in terms of my working capabilities and what I could do. And so I was lucky that, when I first joined, I had a boss who very much like Greg's background, but I was like, for me, he was like he's my mentor, even to this day, because he changed, right? He changed, he kind of understood, and I got exposed to a lot of channels, TV channels, which I was like 22 or something like that, which I would never have been involved in because I stood my ground and actually demonstrated my value to him. He gave me opportunities to work on a lot of TV channels, which at 22, you shouldn't be really doing. Like I worked on UK Living, which is like the first channel dedicated for women. Worked on Trouble, which is designed for 13-year-old girls, right? 42. Anyways, will be about 30, probably watch this channel, right? I was never a teenage girl, right? And for me, that was one of my best channels. Now, we know what this was, but it was one of my favorite channels that I worked on, simply because it stretched me. I was quite comfortable working on things like, TNT and stuff like that, which were like movie channels and stuff like that, and Bravo. I was quite happy doing that, because that was very much in my ballpark. Well, actually doing, he allowed me to do projects like that, and that's simply because I stood my ground and fought my course and actually made sure Bryce and I got myself into those meetings. And that's super important that you have to do that. And my kids, one of the things I say to them is, actually, you're going to have virtually a story life, right? And it's just part and parcel of human nature, where you are, the unfamiliar is always the challenge for people, right? And people like, like sex. Everybody likes sex of people they hang out with, right? You can see it in football, you can see how we dress, you can see tribes. People love tribes, and in order to break the tribes, you've got to put yourself forward and also take a little bit of the most as well. So for me, that's the thing that I think is super important. And I'll pass the mic in a minute. I didn't tell you I talk too much. Well, one of the guys at work said to me, I told him I was coming, and he said to me, well, you haven't experienced any risk. You couldn't have it. Not you. And I said, yeah, I did, and I still do. And I said, picture this, right? And he lives in Cambridge, lovely place in Cambridge. I said to him, have you walked into a room where there's like 2,000 people and you're the only white person in there, everybody else looks like me? And he goes, no. I said, how would that make you feel? And he goes, a little bit awkward. And I said, that's what I've had to do in my career. That was my first 5 years of my career working in media. And so when you have to deal with that, you have to get a thick skin, but you also have to demonstrate and understand something which some people may not understand in this room, right? A lot of people back then, their all exposure to people of my color was on the bill. So the bill was for the guys who are under 35. Was a television soap program, and it was about the police. And the only black people you saw on there were committing crimes. And so that was the only people they'd ever seen before. It's not saying that it's not a joke, right? But it's and that's, if you understand, that's what it's like to be a black male going into this environment. Like, I'll tell you one thing, and I'll shut up. One of my boss at Samsung, guys at Samsung, she was the VP of Insights, and she went to career. So it was only like, you have to be VP and above. And so basically, there's only about 200 VPs at Samsung globally. She walks into the room, and she told me she was the only woman in that environment. And I said, that's what I've had to deal with all my whole career. And she understood.
I actually want to ask you just one other thing, which I'm probably going to regret, but anyway. Because the next topic is cross-collaboration. And you made the point, when you made some comments on it, that people talk to you in street slang. I'm thinking, my God. So it reminded me of, I grew up in London, and even in the 60s, London was reasonably ethnically diverse. But my white middle-class mother, every time she came across somebody that was not white, would talk to them very loudly and very slowly, which was really, really embarrassing. But, in the 60s, in all honesty, she genuinely didn't know any better. And I was thinking, I hope we've moved on from that, but clearly from what you've said, I can't believe people speak to you in urban slang. That just seems ridiculous. Does this still happen now?
I'll answer this very quickly. Yeah, it does. And I have to say to people, no, I'm not street, I live in Surrey, mate. So, you've got to laugh it off. Honestly, if you don't, because when it happens, you're going to get really wound up. And my thing that I always say to people, right, to get people to change, you've got to take them on the journey, and that journey needs to be steps. The more you shout, the less people listen. And that's really, really important. So you need to kind of take people on the journey. And having that, it made that person feel a little bit more comfortable. Made that person feel more comfortable they've done the wrong thing. So that's where it stops. You've got to laugh it off and fight your battles in the right places.
I'm now going to take it in slightly different directions. One of the things that I've found fascinating with the whole inclusion thing is the amount there is to learn. I mean, you just can't possibly know it all. And you made a very good point when talking about, sorry Sarah, you made a very good point, yes. We're talking about cross-collaboration in that actually you need experts, don't you, in different areas. It's no good thinking, oh, well, I've got somebody that's not white on the team, so therefore they can understand, I don't know, Arab culture. I mean, why would Nathan understand that? So it's getting to know all the different subtleties, and you said, you know, using different consultants to understand those different areas.
Yeah, we work with cultural consultants all the time. We are based in the UK, but work internationally. We work multi-markets, and I can't begin to understand what it's like in another. Like, even in, say for example, we've done projects in Singapore. It was a professional B2B interview. English is the language. We could have easily done it was online. We could have easily done it ourselves. But no, because the working culture of the Singaporeans is so different. We needed somebody to be conducting that interview that understood what was the unsaid in that conversation, right? The working culture is not something that they can articulate and say, well, we can't leave until the boss leaves, and it's a hierarchical thing, and we're expected to do long hours, blah, blah, blah. They can't say, there was a lot that they couldn't say. So with working with cultural experts, you really get to understand what the unsaid is, and also through the analysis. So we were doing a project, for example, we were looking at professionals who were studying and working at the same time for professional exams. So we were looking at the working culture. We were looking at people who are neurodiverse, LGBTQ+, low economic income, women, and another one that escapes me. But Black British, we were looking at the analysis, we were trying to understand why we were learning what we were learning from the analysis. And one of the members of the team that we were working with is a cultural expert, is a Black British woman, so ticks lots of these boxes. And she was able to help us to understand the analysis, literally by helping us go back in the heritage of these cultures. So we were looking at the aspirations and career progressions, and she was saying, but the Black African and the Black Caribbean history of coming to this culture, the migration patterns, the jobs that their ancestors and generations before them went into will impact what they see as attainable and achievable and what is expected of them within their careers. So for this particular career we were looking at, it was going to be more attainable for the Black Africans because it was kind of part of what they'd come through. That's for me when the penny dropped of the cultural understanding, and when even within groups I could have gone and said, oh yes, well, the LGBT community plus this think this, and the women think this, and the Black British think this, but actually understanding the heritage and the cultural insights that's going on within a community changed the narrative completely. So when we're working internationally, we are always working with a local cultural expert to help us understand the unspoken and the heritage.
Sorry, there's a question here. Sorry, there's a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm Jo, I'm from QMind. I come from a first generation university family. My family are very working class. I come into market research, the very middle class. I'm relating a lot what you're saying about not attainable career progression. I had no mentors or family members who were in management or CEO roles. So what I could do as a career was very hard. I had no one to follow. It's not just about your ethnic diversity. You've got to look at people from working class backgrounds who are white, who need to be lifted up and told you can achieve that. That's something you're missing here. But I agree with everything you said about.
I think you raised 2 points for me here. First of all, I think that when it comes to inclusion, we focus on certain things. Ethnicity, on gender, on neurodiversity to some extent, on sexuality, but there are areas that are not as well considered. One of them is disability. You know, we're still, in fact, I've met virtually no one in this profession who is physically disabled. And the other one is age. And you're right, we also don't have enough people. I think it's improving slightly. And it's sort of then feeding on to what you're saying. I think that as a profession, we are still largely white and middle class. And it's not, yes, how do we improve on that?
I think it got worse because when I joined whatever industry, you know, advertising, marketing, there was a post room and the secretaries, and there were routes for working class people to come into our industry. And my observation, being the age I am, is it's got worse. So we are more middle class than we would have been when I joined. Because those routes in, bright lad in the post room, bright woman in the secretarial pool, could be a great planner, could be a great market researcher, and so that is something I just wanted to build on what you said.
Yeah, no, you're right, because when I started, a lot of people came up through field. We don't really have field anymore. Sorry, yes.
How much is it that non-white people are being able to uplift themselves more through being in second generation, third generation? I'm also first generation university. Like, you've been able to uplift yourself in society as immigrants, children of immigrants, and then obviously, and Sarah, you've remote working models for your business, that definitely facilitates more people that can come from across the country to get into your business. So how much of that is industry changing versus non-white people uplifting themselves up through society and through education to be able to open up these opportunities for themselves?
Well, yeah, one of my thoughts with that is, there are a lot of people that go to university that are non-white, but they choose not to go into market research. They would rather be lawyers or doctors, or I don't know whether there's something that, yeah, sorry Nathan, you're better qualified than me.
I would say that one of the issues is there aren't very many people who look like you, right? And when you get in, you have to find somebody. My advice to anybody who's starting off their career is find somebody, find an ally. Because I'm a bit of a history buff, I'm a nerd. So wars are not won by one country, those won by allies, right? You need to find an ally, find somebody who can mentor you. That's super important. And if you come from an ethnic background or you go around social mobility and people talk like you or speak like you or look like you, it's sometimes hard and uncomfortable to actually go to somebody and ask that question. And I think that's super important because that's what holds people back. If you look at when I joined media, I had a different experience from you. It took me ages to get into it. My first job was working for Cara, and it took me ages to get that job. And what for me, the reason why it took me so long is because, and this is kind of weird, a bit weird what I'm saying now because everybody does this now. My dad didn't play golf, right? And there's a difference now because golf is democratized and everybody plays golf now. But in the old days, it was a very, very, very middle class sport, right? And that's how you got in. And there's a reason why, you know, when I was a youngster, there's a reason why the salaries were so poor. I told my daughter how poor. She goes, how did you live on that? I said, my super. But the reason why the salaries are so poor, because that's supposed to be your pocket money. Mom and daddy is supposed to pay for you. And so that's what it's like. So when I say, when you get in, find a mentor. That person doesn't have to look like you, but somebody who gives you the confidence to grow. That's very, very important, because if not, you look at the door and you go, you know what, there's nobody in there who looks like me, I'm not going to do it. And that continues to perpetuate the problem. And it's what the police have faced for decades, right? The reason why I gave that story about being stopped 30 times by the time I was 35, which is hilarious. I could, you know, I was trying to hear some of those stories. I can tell you some of them, but not today. There's a reason for that. because there were a lot of people who look like me, and so they had these perceptions of who I was before they even saw me, until they spoke to me. So I think that's what I would advise to anybody, whether it's social mobility, disability, or it's gender specific. Find a mentor who can help you, and find an ally who can help you. It's super important, because if not, you're just going to beat yourself up, and you cannot, and stress this, you cannot win a war. You can't win wars by yourself. You have to find somebody you can ally with. That's super important.
I'd like to ask Greg and Sarah about recruitment, because I'm a recruitment consultant. One of the things that I do actually for SMR is I go around to universities and I talk about careers in insights, in data, and market research. And every single talk that I go to, the range of people that come to that talk is enormous. It's all ethnicities. It's a really, we get a really wide range of people interested. And then when I actually see them as new starters in the profession, they somehow magically appear to turn out to be white and middle class. And I really don't know how that happens. So just from your own experience of recruitment, what can you do to, I don't know, just encourage and employ more people outside that white middle class bracket?
Okay, so let's go back about 4 years, and we were applying for a research framework for a very big organisation you'd all recognise. And we filled out, the 105-page framework application, and we were invited to interview. It was COVID, so it was online. So we met with, 3 or 4 of them, and there was 4 of us from our side. And we went through the framework interview, blah, blah, blah. And they ended with the question, what are you doing to proactively recruit more ethnic minorities to your organisation? I was flabbergasted. The 4 people on that call, 2 women, 2 men, 2 from the LGBTQ+ community, 2 non-British natives, 1 neurodiverse. I was like, I haven't ticked the colour box. I genuinely was like, because you visually cannot. I was so cross that I couldn't answer the question. So I came off that call and was like, do you know what? Exactly, what am I doing? So we took a proactive decision to address what we were doing internally about ourselves. So we basically you cannot recruit a diverse workforce unless you are in a position to allow those people to come in, be themselves, grow, and accept who they are. You're not developing clones, right? So we had to get our own, I had to make sure we had our own house in order before we could go out there and promote we were inclusive, we were progressive, we would accept anyone, all that kind of stuff. I was like, can I genuinely put my hand on heart and say that? So we did a lot of work, and some of you may have heard this over the years. We worked with a biodiverse consultant. I mean, what's one of them? So she looks at nature and says, well, what can we as people learn from nature? Nature has evolved for thousands of years through many natural disasters, through lots of other things. So anyway, we did a lot of work looking at things like, for example, where are the richest diverse cultures on Earth? They are where the land meets the sea, or water, because you've got all the land richness and plants, vegetation, animals, you've got all the sea and the water animals, and then that bit in the middle, the shoreline, is where you've got a bit of both. You've got that mixture and that nutrients to both, and they've got to adapt to live with both. What did we learn from that? We will be better off as an organisation if we recruit from outside our industry and we learn what they have got to give us. We will be richer if we bring people in who have got different experiences, different lenses on the world, different cultural experiences. So we deliberately, proactively try to recruit people who come from different experiences and backgrounds. Within my team, we're only small. We've got people from academia, people from client side, people from qual, we've got people who I've just literally offered a job this week to a openly proud neurodiverse market researcher, and I'm so excited about what I'm going to learn about her superpowers and what she's going to bring. So I'm just like, people see the world differently, and the more we bring that in. I have to say though, and probably is going to go against everything we're trying to do tonight, I'm proactively trying to get a man on my team, and that's what I'm struggling with, if I'm honest. Craig, are you looking for a job? Sorry.
I mean, I'm going to come back with what you're paying, but anyway. But no, this question of why diversity, I think, is a really important one. Like, why do we want to be diverse? It's not a matter of ticking boxes. It's not a matter of going, brilliant, I've got a brown woman on the team. That is not the goal of this. And I think it's really interesting. My wife, as I've said, proudly Filipino. You meet Marie, she looks entirely Filipino. She offers nothing in terms of cultural diversity. She's British, through and through. But she ticks a lovely box if you're asked that question around ethnic diversity, sure. And I'll be honest, it's not hindered her career in any way. In fact, if anything, we've had a conversation at home where her ability to tick that box has actually helped her on occasion, because she's in the research industry as well, and there are so few ethnically diverse women in their 40s in the industry that it's been something that's really helped her in some ways. But again, it doesn't offer cultural diversity. She's British. She watched Bullseye as a kid. She's very much through her breath. So I think it does come back to how we're defining diversity and what that really means and why we want diverse teams. And it stems from that desire to bring different experiences in. Bringing people in mid-career who've got a range of experiences can be absolutely fantastic. If you expect all of your grads to come in from university and then stay with you for 20 years, they will all become clones of each other in the end, right? Regardless of what background they might have had before that. So bringing people in and freshening up the team with people from different backgrounds. And it's easy to think that a different background is just a different country or a different religion or whatever, but that nuance to it, that concept of the diversity, some of them being completely invisible to us. You talked about disability, neurodivergence. These things are not visible. They're not always things that are worn as labels. You can't spot them. You can't see man, woman, black, white. With some of these things, there's much more nuance on a spectrum, and bringing that variety in is so key to success. I was on a webinar at Ipsos earlier today, and Ben Page, who many of you will know, was talking about our plans for 2025. And what he said, and it was something I did write it down, so I'm without getting my phone out and reading it verbatim, I'm going to get this wrong, but Ben said something along the lines of, we want to be as diverse as the audiences that we research as a business. And as researchers, we are all innately curious, I would hope. If anyone wants to volunteer themselves as not curious now, you're in the wrong place, I would argue. We are innately curious people, right? And we want to learn about ourselves, we want to learn about those audiences. And the audiences that our clients are selling to, or are representing, depending on the sector that they're in, are the entire population. And so the research industry needs to be staffed with people from the entire population. To the lady's point earlier, yes, that includes people from the lower classes, of course it does. It includes people from the upper classes, of course it does. It includes that entire spectrum. And whether we're talking class, gender, age, race, neurodivergence, whatever it is, it's vital that they are included within the industry.
So you've taken me onto my hobby horse, which is age. I estimate about 3% of the insight profession are aged 55 and over. More than 50% of consumer spend is done by people aged 55 and over. It makes no sense commercially not to have more people with grey hair working in the profession.
Stand by for some exciting Ipsos thought leadership on this coming out later this year. Needed to get that plug in. No, we're literally in the midst of preparing a piece on what we're calling perennials, that generation who don't really get old at the moment, and who, I mean, there's so much diversity in that group of 55 to 65, 65 to 75, 75 plus, all of whom have got different needs, different spending powers, different interests. And yeah, treating them as one homogenous block of oldies, when they're actually some of the people with the highest disposable incomes in the country is just bonkers. Completely agree.
I'm going to talk about a tangible thing what happens today. You just reminded me of something that happened today. So I'm sitting in a Shark beauty workshop, and we're talking about what all our new products in 2026 if you could. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I suggest you might want to read it. But we're talking about a hair care product, we're talking about the face mask, the LED mask, new version of it coming out next year, there's 2 years, and some other stuff I can't talk about on NBA. But what I found really fascinating about the conversation was everybody kept talking about young Gen Zs, and I kept saying, and at one point, when the meeting was about to close, I thought, I'm going to say something, because this is just ridiculous. Gen Zs are really, really enticing for advertisers, right? It's the young, the vibrant, they're cool. Everybody wants them. They don't have any money. So I had to show them some figures, right? It's just simple, showing them people in the room some figures. So when you are a company which is really successful in social media, which we have, sometimes people forget that it's not just the young people that buy your products. So yes, Gen Z are really important. They are trendsetters. They are the ones in the market which, particularly for beauty, but others follow. And when you look at the sales numbers, the number one, not surprisingly, is millennials. They spend more on beauty products than anybody else. The second is Gen X, not Gen Z, because they haven't got any money. And that's the thing, you have to take people through it. When you deal with, and I'm client side, right? So I have to be honest. When you take people through the numbers, people get it. And it's really about making sure you attract the wider spectrum of consumers and actually making people understand really who your target audience is. Because if you go to our website, have a look at Dyson's website, it's the same. Everybody, beautifully diverse people, every color of the spectrum, but nobody over the age of 40. Honestly, it's silly. And I think, one of the things you have to, as we live longer, and you all know, you heard numbers, we're all going to live longer. In old days, if this was like 200 years ago, at 40, you'd be all dead, right? The reality is we live a lot healthier lives, right? And so people have aspirations to continue their beauty routines way beyond 60, right? And we've got people in this research here, I did with somebody else, really good. Greg's did some other work for me, it's fantastic. But I think that's what I would say in this environment. What you have to do is not the full leadership pieces, it's actually showing the numbers. Once you show the numbers, then the clients get it, and then the clients will change their strategy accordingly. So things like, one of the things we're going to start talking about is women going through menopause, right? Because your hair changes in menopause, right? It does. So anybody's had a baby, your hair is at your best if you had a baby. In menopause, your hair changes. So how are you going to cater for that audience? Who's your primary audience? They're the second biggest audience when it comes to beauty, and you're not talking to them in the language you're supposed to know to them. And I think that's where, working with people like Greg and other organizations, other research companies, yours as well, and some really good ones as well. Will help you take people through that journey so people understand that there's a wider spectrum of people out there that you need to cater for. And I always say, I'll end this by saying, it's always about the money. When you work on the client side like I do, I've spent all my life in it, it's about following the money. And once you can tell people, take people through the story of the money and who's your audience, and when you do segmentation, which is one of my favorite, do some segmentation with you, is my favorite project. It's not about the volume of the segments, it's the value that counts. Because and when you take people for that, they can't get it. And that stops the age problem.
I am feeling we need to cheer louder than next door. We've got twice as many people and they're making a lot of noise.
And I'm thinking, Tara, I've been the most useless chair, and we're only halfway through question 2. How much longer have we got?
We've got another 15 minutes, so maybe we can open up so there's Q&A.
Yeah.
A little bit later started.
Well, can I just ask, because I feel Greg has not talked quite as much, being sort of white male. And I just did want to ask, because he's lived, well, so have you, in Singapore, in very different cultures, whether he felt he'd learned anything from working and being an inclusive leader in a very different culture, whether he felt, anyway, I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, and I think it comes back to that definition of diversity. When I was a kid growing up in white England, for me diversity was based on nationality and food and politics and history and so these are the things I studied. Like moving to France was exciting because people drank wine and all of these things, and that was really cool. But it was when you go and visit a country where you're totally like a fish out of water, where you realise that you yourself are different. So I lived in Japan for a year in 2001. Yes, I am that old. And that was amazing, where I had kind of the reverse discrimination of some of what Nathan's been through there, where I was the person that stood out in a room, but as the white man in Japan, I was like the celebrity, I was like the superstar. So it was a very different dynamic.
It's a lot different, right? And I think one of the challenges, even when I lived in Nigeria for 4 years, right? And I call this thing colonial bias, right? Colonial racism. And I experienced it there. So the pecking order in my parents' own country is if you're white, you get treated bad, right? And then if you were black, next Asian, there's a lot of Asians in Africa, all right? Then you get treated somewhat better, not as good as the white people. And then if you're like me, expat, then I get treated better than the locals. And that's what it's like. I went to India, same thing. What I found was really fascinating going to India is like, I got treated better than my Asian friends who went there, which is really weird. I found that really strange. And I think one thing I would just say about when it comes to race and things like that is, we're all quite different. So this thing about culture is quite different. So there'll be people who live in Asian cultures or black cultures. I'm African, so I have very different culture to somebody who's West Indian. And I think sometimes we forget that we're not. When you look at people, we're people into little boxes, right? And that's our job, right? I say that's my wife all the time. What you do for them, I put people in boxes. But I think you've got to understand the boxes are small and they are different. There's different people in there. So I kind of get what you meant about your wife being anglicised, and she has had problems. Or there are people who in this country who are born here, they're involved in the culture and do experience problems, and the one thing I will say is, just because you look similar doesn't mean we're all the same, and I think that's really important. So you look at, I like looking at numbers, but if you look at the most successful Asian group in this country, they're all, if you track their backgrounds, it is East Africans. They're all from Uganda, Kenya. So their aspirations of coming over to this country are different. So most of that cabinet, that horrible cabinet, which just left us, they're all, most of them, if not all of them, are East African backgrounds. So there's a reason for that, and it's because they come with a certain middle class aspiration, right? Because, that system which probably get me in trouble, right? If you study history, there's a reason why there were Asians in Africa. And it stems from the fact that the British couldn't, if you run an empire, you can't trust the natives, the black Africans, to run themselves. They encourage Asians to go with them. And to this day, they're one of the most successful groups in this country as a result of that. So you've got to understand that what I was trying to say is that you've got got to treat people slightly differently, and not expect them all to be the same. Because that's the thing I've been going through all my life, and I crack that joke about the bill, and people over 35 kind of got it, and the ones did. But that's really important, because that's how, if I said it flippantly, but that's how you get treated in work.
Do you have anything you want to add? Because you were in Singapore for a while, weren't you? No. Okay. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to finish that conversation off. Yeah, so in Singapore where I was, yeah, we had a team, and it's great to see Ken here today. Who was in that team? I like him. But yeah, we had a team, and I was doing the maths earlier. I think there was a team of like 25 of us, and I think we had 10 nationalities in that team. And the way to make it work, to answer your question, Liz, was to set a really clear set of goals for us, a really clear vision for the company, because it didn't matter then where people were from. If people knew what they were doing and what their roles were, they could all pull together for it. And we were able to put people into the right roles, not based on where they were from or what their cultural background was, but on their skill set. So you remember Rob, our DP wizard at the time. Rob was he was so young, he was like 22 or something. Straight out of uni, flown in from Manila, wanted an interview in a market research firm. I saw something in him, we appointed him, and he was absolutely brilliant, wasn't he? Absolutely brilliant, no real experience. But was absolutely fantastic. And we had our sort of HR guru was Natalie Natsuhoi, who was an Asian Kiwi. It didn't matter where people were from, it was a matter of setting a vision for the business and finding the right people, irrelevant of where they were from or what they looked like, to fill those roles. And everybody fulfilled them because they knew what their own part of that jigsaw was. So I think in a business, if you've got a clear vision for what the business is doing, then you're able to bring that diversity to the fore to deliver to it.
I'm going to bring us back to what I think I understood the kind of purpose of today was how do you nurture that diversity and how do you encourage and allow that diversity within your workforce. And I think there is absolutely about having a common goal and having the right people on the bus and they're all going in whatever direction you're going in. But I think there's also that acknowledgement of that people are individual and everybody's different and everybody works differently. So if we're coming back to that day-to-day working and we're trying to understand how we can all work together when we're different, I think there is an onus on managers, leaders, to be proactively having conversations with their teams. Not because they come from an ethnic minority background, not because they're disabled, not because they're a woman, not because you're a parent, but everybody should be asked, what is your way of working? How do you organise your day? Do you prefer feedback to be written or verbal? Do you want to speak in the moment or do you want to reflect on it and talk later? What do you do for lunch? What goes on outside your life that influences on your daily working pattern? You might be walking your dog, you might be going to the gym, you might be your sole carer for an elderly parent. All of these things matter, but all of these things are not conversations that happen naturally. And I just think if we're going to think about recognising diversity, and one of the things that we've done is if we're going to promote the fact that we are diverse and inclusive, we need to recognise that everybody, no matter what your background or experience, is different. So how do we capture that? So we have a ways of working form. When you join Magenta, you fill it out and it's got all of those kind of questions on. But you're not held to it. You share it then with the team. We regularly share these, like how do you organise your day? Like just a basic thing, like what's your to-do list look like? How do you block out periods of time? Do whatever. But it's about revisiting that and thinking that people are changing and reminding ourselves how we did. I know there's people in my team that I can instantly just Zoom call and go, I'm really stuck. What's that thing I'm trying to remember? And they'll go, and help me. There are other people that need me to message them and say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Call me when you're ready, because they think differently. And it doesn't always work. I don't always remember who I can call and who I can't. But just recognising that everybody is different and proactively asking your team, what can I do to make you the best that you can be, is a basic and what we should be doing for everybody.
So I think that's a really important point. You can tell really where everyone's happening. And you know, because actually we are all different, and lots of us, most of us probably, are diverse in more than one way. So, you know, you can't just stereotype people and target certain things. You've got to treat everybody individually. Great point. I need to throw it open because I've probably got about 5 minutes now and I'm really going to be in trouble. So, do we have a mic, or are people just going to stand up and shout?
We've only got the one mic, so if you don't mind shouting or just talking very loudly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot. What are your thoughts? Has anyone got any questions? What did you think that, of all the comments that have been made, what resonated with you?
I think the last thing that was just
Could you stand up just so we can hear you
I
better?
think that the last thing that we just discussed was fascinating, right? I think there's so many spaces that are opening up right now where we have to be more communicative. There's so many social norms that are breaking down where only solution is to not have common expectations in people, and to communicate what our individual specific needs are. There's a continuous tension there between what professional standards are versus what these, and Rachel and I were just discussing
What
this
professional
briefly,
is.
like what
The code
professional
switching
needs
to do that.
continuous kind of, you know, you bring yourself to work, but yourself is not exactly welcome, right? So there is that Rose talking about tensions, right? Research and strategy, right? That to me is the tension where the degrees to which you're able to actually do that and how welcoming your workplace is of those things being yourself. And, you know, I'm diverse in some ways, but you know, and I welcome the diversity of other people, but then equally, there's only so much I want to like deal with, right, at work. So there's that ongoing thing that is always happening. It's like an interesting opening up of our worlds in this way, our professional worlds. So
Go on then.
I wish I don't like using this expression. It's not one of mine. I hate it. I only use it as privilege. I've never had that privilege, and so for me, I've always had to walk in eggshells. So I can't have a bad day.
Yes.
You know, if I have a bad day, then I'm the stereotype black angry Will Smith, right? Because that's the image that the people have of me. And so I wish I could be my authentic self. I wish I could be that person my friends see outside work. In work, I have a different character to what I actually am outside. So that's you know, the Americans like using that word privilege. I think they will be using it wrongly. But I think in that incident, I think Lord, I wish I did have that.
Exactly. I think women can identify with that too. I think that there's a way of showing up as a white male that
well, yeah, because if you show up authentically, then all of a sudden you're
too
emotional
passionate.
or passionate or...
In the culture we work with, being passionate about your work is somehow suspicious, and the more deadpan and, you know, dry you can be about something, the more successful you'll be. I think that's
I've got one thought. We've just done a sort of census of the insight profession. And interestingly, there is a direct correlation between employers where their staff genuinely think they are doing cultural initiatives that make a difference. So those that work for employers that really believe the employers are making headway in this area, they are also happier. They're happier with their work. So, it obviously is really important. And it's not, we didn't sort of necessarily think that the two were going to come together, but actually it really does make a difference. So the other thing actually is interesting. I can't remember because we haven't finished the study yet, but it's only about 55-60% of the people that we asked think that their employer really is making headway in this area. So there's obviously a long way to go. So, yeah, I don't know if that's thrown over any thoughts that any of you want to comment on.
So I'm an international student in the UK, and it's very interesting to listen to this conversation because in the UK, we're talking about diversity of international students. We are a very big pool of diversity because we came from a bunch of different places, right? But it's very hard to get a job nowadays. So when you talk about, oh, it's very hard to include diversity in your team, it's actually very hard for people that represent the diversity to get a job. Because even when you apply for companies, big companies, and such as Ipsos is one of these big market research companies, they do have a license to sponsor us, but they don't want to sponsor us. So we have another challenge when we are searching for jobs, and there is no transparency in the communication with the pool of international students because you keep applying, and companies keep recognizing themselves as diverse, but they never talk to us why they are rejecting us. And like the underlying problem of this is the visa situation, and even when you try to apply for big companies that can sponsor you, they don't want to sponsor you.
I will say, I mean, I obviously don't work for any of those organisations, but I am obviously involved in some of that. The problem is it's hugely expensive. That's why there aren't more foreign students. A lot of organisations would love to employ more foreign students, but they just can't afford it. I don't know if you...
No, I mean that's absolutely the case. It certainly isn't an attempt to exclude. In fact, in the post-pandemic period, we signed on, I'm going to say hundreds. That's probably an exaggeration. Certainly, high 10 figures of overseas grads and younger students and younger workers into the Ipsos business. Monique and Rachel, I'm sure, can attest to that. We've got a really, really rich seam of international diversity, at the very least, in the 20, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but it's somewhere in the 25 to 32 year age groups. But since then, the visa requirements, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not an HR professional, but the visa requirements have tightened, and it does make it harder, for sure. It is more expensive. I think we have to commit to longer visas for international students. I think it's something that in the current economic climate, the Bank of England called it uncertain times or something today. We're all facing a really challenging economic environment, and so hiring anybody is currently a bit of a challenge for any business. If a visa then is on top of that, it's a purely economic decision. It's certainly not related to any desire to reduce diversity. I know that maybe it doesn't make it easier to hear, but that's the rationale for it.
No, I like the transparency because it's very good to hear from us, from you guys, your opinion on this, and I am aware that it's economically a burden to hire us, but the main takeaway is that's the reason why you have this pool of diversity and international talent that come here to the UK but cannot access the job market.
I would love to lobby the government. The government needs to make it easier to employ, because I think that's one of the things that changed. You said we were more diverse. I actually think that 20 years ago it was easier to bring people in from other countries to work within the profession than it is now.
I could just give you a very recent example. So we had somebody that was with us on a post-student visa, Indian, working in the UK, and she, at the end of her 2 years, she would need sponsorship to stay. And after 1 year, we started looking into it. I'm a small company. It was going to cost me financially £5,000 to apply for the legal paperwork and go through the process, purely to allow me to sponsor her. And then the minimum wage, because it's changed, I'm really sorry, but she was an entry-level person. The minimum wage I had to pay her was £35,000 a year. That's not an entry-level wage for somebody in our industry, unfortunately. So I had a very open conversation with her that said, I'm really sorry, I cannot support you. She was already working with us as a kind of graduate, but I couldn't, as a small business, sustain the economic sponsorship and salary that would be expected of me to recruit her. It just didn't make sense for me as a small business.
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, we are trying to achieve a goal, but we have the government. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I mean, the government.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, as much as I'm sure there are people that have voted for Brexit here in the room, that's also another massive millstone around the research industry. When I started as a graduate in the research industry in 2003, can't remember, back in the early 2000s, my colleagues were French, were German, were Polish, were Czechs. It was certainly European, massive diversity right across the board. They've all gone home. They don't live here anymore. It's a simple fact. It's really, really difficult. So in the graduate cohorts now that companies are recruiting, it's either from much further overseas or it's from British Brits with British passports. So that diversity is definitely being impacted by Brexit as well.
Shall we? Do you want to wrap it up? Yes, you do. Can I just speak for myself? Because I'm standing for the MRS board, and I would love it if you would vote for me. So thank you. Tara, I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like this is a topic and a subject we could literally sit here and talk about all night. And I feel like there is so much more work that we can all do. And that communication is really a key takeaway that I've taken away tonight. So, I would like you to cheer louder than the room next door for our amazing panellists this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving up your time this evening. And the fun doesn't stop there, because we are now going to move into the next part of the event where we have some networking. So you can continue these conversations. We have some food coming out in about 10 minutes time, and then there's also more drinks available at the bar. But there's also some buckets of beers that have been placed around the venue. We are going to try and move out all of these chairs in the middle location. So if you wouldn't mind kind of moving towards the back end of the venue to clear that area. But thank you again. Thank you to all of our sponsors, our amazing panellists, and all of you for coming along this evening. Thank you.